The half moon hung high in the sky, casting its silver glow over a vast murky bog. The stagnant water stretched endlessly, its surface broken by faint ripples that shimmered like shattered glass. A haunting stillness dominated the landscape, broken only by the gentle rustles of cattails swaying in the breeze, their colors shifting between black and green as though caught in an eternal, otherworldly dance. Bright green fireflies floated lazily above the bog, their bioluminescence creating patches of ghostly light that illuminated the water's surface. They moved in hypnotic patterns, their glow flickering like emerald stars against the shadows. The bog exhaled a faint, hollow whistle as though the land itself breathed, its secrets locked beneath the blackened waters. Standing at the edge of this spectral tableau was Zephyr, his black cloak blending seamlessly with the gloom. The fabric barely stirred in the stagnant air, a silent sentinel against the oppressive stillness. His face, partially obscured by the cloak's hood, reflected the pale moonlight. His gaze was fixed on the sky, eyes calm but heavy with an unspoken weight. "The moon," he murmured. His voice was low yet resonant, as though the bog itself carried his words. A distant chime echoed through the night, soft and fleeting, like the ghost of a bell lost to time. Zephyr's gaze lingered on the celestial body above, his eyes reflecting its light with a solemn intensity. "Upon completion," he whispered, his tone reflective, carrying a depth that seemed to ripple through the air. He stepped forward, his talons sinking slightly into the wet, spongy ground. Each step was accompanied by a faint splash, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the bog's oppressive weight. The water rippled unnaturally beneath his feet, disturbed by something unseen. Small tentacle-like roots rose briefly from the surface before retreating into the depths, as if testing his resolve. "The Reaper comes to collect," Zephyr said, his voice darkening. He paused, the air around him growing heavier, laden with an unspoken tension. "Omens that come to pass." The fireflies swirled around him, their patterns forming fleeting, intricate shapes that dissolved almost as quickly as they appeared. Their movements were purposeful, as though they danced to an inaudible melody only they could hear. Zephyr raised his wings slightly, his feathers outstretched as if grasping for an invisible thread. "The myths know no bounds," he said, his tone filled with a quiet conviction. The bog responded, the water rippling again, in unnatural patterns. Zephyr's voice, steady and almost reverent, carried through the night. The Origin's tentacles unhooked the knots of resistance. The chimes returned, louder now, their sound resonating through the bog like a faint melody from a forgotten dream. Zephyr closed his eyes briefly, his expression softening as the sound enveloped him. "Letting go of service no longer necessary," he murmured, opening his eyes. His gaze hardened, his tone was firm. The chimes sound as horizons merge. A faint mist began to roll across the surface of the water, swirling around Zephyr's feet. It clung to him, like a shroud, its ethereal tendrils weaving through the air. The fireflies' glow intensified momentarily, their light reflecting off the water in a dazzling display of green brilliance. "The greatest gift comes with a purge," Zephyr declared, his voice carrying a quiet strength. "Energy now must flow. The army of doubt must let go." He knelt by the water's edge, his movements were deliberate. Dipping his wing into the cool, dark water, he sent small ripples outward, their concentric circles distorting the moon's reflection. His voice softened, almost a whisper. "The river winds, and the river knows the memories that hinder." Slowly he rose to his feet, his voice growing stronger. "The ones that flourish, the stems that wilt." As he spoke, a small seed pod drifted by, its faint glow illuminating the water for a brief moment before it sank beneath the surface. Zephyr watched it disappear, his expression contemplative. "Seeds that entangle vision," he said, his tone philosophical. He took a deep breath, his shoulders straightening as he resumed his walk. The spongy ground beneath his boots squelched faintly with each step. "Upon harvest, space clears for materialization. A new growth," he said, stopping by a cluster of gnarled roots. Their twisted tips glowed faintly, reaching deep into the earth as if drawn by an unseen force. Zephyr knelt, tracing a talon along the roots. His touch was reverent. "Towards the light the roots siphon their direction," he said, his voice tinged with awe. The water mirrored his shadow, its reflection distorted and shifting like a living thing. Zephyr stared at it, his expression unwavering. "Leaving behind the page," he said, his tone was calm, enduring and harnessing the rage. He walked deeper into the bog, the fireflies scattering around him as though guiding his path. His steps created faint splashes that echoed eerily through the night. "Calligraphy sets a new stage," he said, his voice was measured. The water's surface shimmered with a faint toxic ripple, its movement hypnotic. The glow of the fireflies dimmed slightly, their light blending with the silver moonlight. "Toxins ripple, spreading like a wildfire of phage," Zephyr said. His tone was dark. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, deep and foreboding. The fireflies scattered, their patterns dissolving into chaos. "This engine that brings the flood," he said, stopping abruptly. His gaze pierced through the darkness as if looking beyond the visible. His expression was unreadable. The mind cannot comprehend. The fireflies returned, their glow forming faint, web-like patterns in the air. Zephyr knelt by the water once more, dipping his wing into the bog to retrieve a waterlogged book. Its pages were damp and heavy, yet he flipped through them with care. Faint images emerged on the pages, shadows of himself and serpents locked in a coiling dance. Sigils can fantasize the stage, he said quietly. His tone was almost reverent. The chimes grew louder, their tone shifting to something darker and more melodic. Resonating deeply in the air, Zephyr stood clutching the book tightly as the chimes faded into silence, leaving only the soft hum of the fireflies. To execute Talon's will, he said, his voice was filled with conviction, each day testing metal on metal. The fireflies swirled faster, their movements chaotic yet strangely beautiful. Zephyr's voice gained strength as he continued, forcing my dragon claw to the pedal. A sudden gust of wind swept through the bog, carrying it with an unnatural chill. Zephyr's cloak billowed slightly, the fabric catching the moonlight as he spoke, his voice softening. Melodic in trance, he murmured, closing his eyes. His voice dropped to a whisper. The words were barely audible. Metamorphosized the sweet kiss. The fireflies' glow dimmed, their light merging with the ethereal glow of the half moon. Zephyr opened his eyes, his gaze steady and filled with quiet awe. Transmute in elder's bliss, he said, stepping forward into the swirling mist. His silhouette faded into the pale light, his voice echoing softly through the night, beyond the pole, into death's lisp. The bog was silent once more, the fireflies drifting lazily as the half-moon's glow bathed the landscape in its haunting light.